If you've ever grown basil and ended up with one tall, skinny stalk with a few sad leaves clinging to the top, I need you to know that it wasn't bad luck, and it wasn't a bad seed packet. It was one specific mistake almost every single beginner makes, and it has nothing to do with watering, sunlight, or soil. It's about where exactly you make your cuts. There is one small trick, a single spot on the stem, that determines whether your basil grows into a tall, leggy, disappointing plant, or explodes into a thick, round, ridiculously productive bush that keeps feeding you all summer long. And once I show you exactly where that spot is, you will never look at a basil plant the same way again. Let's get into it. Here's the thing about basil that almost nobody explains clearly. This plant doesn't branch on its own just because it's healthy. It branches because you tell it to, and the way you tell it to is by cutting in the right place. Basil leaves grow in pairs, directly across from each other on the stem, and then the stalk continues straight up to the next pair. If you leave the plant alone, it just keeps stacking pairs of leaves straight upward, chasing sunlight, and you end up with exactly that lanky, top-heavy stalk everyone's frustrated by. But every single pair of leaves hides a secret. Tucked right in the little notch where each leaf meets the main stem, there's a dormant growth point, basically a sleeping branch waiting for a signal to wake up. Cut the stem just above that pair, and instead of one stalk continuing upward, that dormant point on both sides activates, and you get two brand new branches growing outward from that exact spot. Cut correctly again on each of those two branches later, and each one splits into two more. That's the entire secret. It's not really pruning in the sense of just trimming leaves for dinner. It's a deliberate, repeatable trick that turns one stem into two, two into four, and four into eight, over the course of a single growing season. So let's talk about exactly where and when to make that first cut, because timing matters here too. Don't touch a young basil seedling right away. Wait until it's somewhere between 6 and 8 inches tall, with at least 2 to 4 solid sets of true leaves, not the little rounded first leaves that show up right after germination, but the proper, pointed basil leaves that come after. Those early leaves are the plant building up its strength, and pruning too soon just weakens a plant that hasn't established itself yet. Once it looks sturdy and it's got some real growth going on, you're ready for the first cut. Look down the main stem and find a healthy set of leaves. Then take clean, sharp scissors, or a pair of small pruning snips, and cut the stem about 1/4 inch above that pair, right above where you can see those tiny new leaves starting to form in the notch. Don't cut through the leaves themselves, just the stem right above them. That's it. That single cut is what sends the signal to the plant to stop growing upward from that point and start growing outward instead. Now here's where people mess this up, and I want to save you from doing it. A lot of gardeners see this trick and get a little too aggressive, hacking off huge sections of the plant all at once, because they figure more cutting means more branching, faster. That's backwards. Basil needs enough leaf area left on the plant to actually photosynthesize and fuel that new growth you just triggered. As a general rule, never remove more than about 20% of the plant in a single pruning session, and resist the urge to grab those big, broad, deep green leaves near the bottom of the plant. Those bottom leaves are the powerhouse of the whole operation, pulling in sunlight and feeding energy to everything above them. The leaves you actually want to target are the smaller ones up top, at the growing tips, which is exactly where that node cutting trick happens anyway. Once you've made that first cut, the real magic happens over the following couple of weeks. You'll start to notice two small new branches emerging right from that cut point, each one eventually growing its own sets of leaves. And here's the part that makes this whole trick so satisfying. Once those new branches get a few sets of leaves of their own, you do the exact same thing to them. Find a healthy node, cut just above it, and each of those branches splits into two more. This is why the growth becomes exponential instead of linear. Your first cut takes you from one stem to two. Your second round of cuts, done on both of those branches, takes you from 2 to 4. Keep doing this every couple of weeks throughout the growing season. And by midsummer, instead of one lonely stalk, you have a dense, rounded bush with dozens of growing tips, all of it producing fresh leaves constantly. Timing your pruning sessions matters too, and this is a small detail that makes a real difference. Try to prune in the morning, rather than in the middle of a hot afternoon. Basil's aromatic oils, the ones responsible for that intense flavor and scent, are most concentrated early in the day, and the leaves are crisper and less stressed, which means they handle the cut and recover much faster. Pruning during peak afternoon heat stresses the plant unnecessarily and can slow down how quickly it bounces back. Once your plant is established and branching well, aim to prune every 1 to 2 weeks throughout the season, Basically, anytime you notice a fresh set of leaves has formed a few inches above your last cut. It's also worth knowing that this trick works a little differently depending on whether your basil is in a container or in the ground, and it's worth adjusting for that. Potted basil has a limited root zone, which means it can only support so much new branching before it starts competing with itself for water and nutrients. If your plant is in a container, lean toward the more conservative end of that 20% rule, and consider feeding it a diluted liquid fertilizer every few weeks once you've got it branching heavily, since all that new growth is pulling nutrients out of a much smaller reservoir of soil than a plant growing directly in garden beds. In-ground basil, on the other hand, especially in rich, well-amended soil, can usually handle slightly more frequent pruning because the root system has room to keep expanding right alongside all that new top growth. And don't let those trimmings go to waste, because this is where the trick pays you back twice. Every stem you cut off during a pruning session, especially the longer ones with a few sets of leaves still attached, can go straight into a glass of water on a sunny windowsill. Within 1 to 2 weeks, you'll start seeing small white roots forming right at the base of the cut stem. Once those roots are about an inch long, that cutting is ready to be planted as an entirely new basil plant, completely free, grown from material you were going to compost anyway. This means the exact same pruning session that's making your existing plant bushier is also quietly building you a second, third, or fourth basil plant on the side, which is a detail most people growing basil never even realize is happening right under their nose. There's one more thing you need to watch for constantly, and honestly, it might matter more than the pruning technique itself. Basil wants to flower and go to seed. That's its entire biological goal, and the moment it succeeds, everything changes. You'll spot the warning sign easily once you know what to look for. A small pyramid-shaped cluster forming at the very top of a stem, different from the regular flat pairs of leaves. The second you see that forming, pinch or snip it off immediately. If you let those flowers develop, the plant redirects nearly all of its energy into making seeds instead of producing more leaves. Growth slows dramatically, and the leaves that remain actually turn more bitter because the plant's chemistry shifts once it's focused on reproducing instead of growing. Staying ahead of those flower buds, checking for them literally every time you walk past the plant, is just as important as the node cutting trick itself, because one missed flower spike can undo weeks of careful pruning in a matter of days. So here's everything wrapped into one simple routine. Wait until your basil is 6 to 8 inches tall with real leaves established, then cut just above a leaf node, a 1/4 inch up, never removing more than about 1/5 of the plant at once, and always leaving those big bottom leaves untouched. Repeat that same cut on every new branch every 1 to 2 weeks, ideally in the morning, and pinch off any flower buds the moment they appear. Follow that loop consistently through the season, and what starts as a single skinny stem in June turns into a thick, round, absurdly productive bush by August, one that keeps handing you fresh basil faster than you can use it. If this finally explained why your basil kept getting leggy, subscribe, because next time I'm showing you how to take cuttings from this same bush and turn one basil plant into an entire free herb garden.